The race for Chicago's new mayor is heating up, and the candidates squared off last night in what was the final televised debate ahead of the election.
Well, there are two Democrats who are pitted against each other, Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson. Their battle for City Hall has exposed a divide within the Democratic Party between the more liberal left and centrist moderates. A big issue for both candidates last night was the Chicago police force and its dwindling numbers.
You have based your entire candidacy around policing, in particular police officers returning to the force. But the former chief of staff of the CPD said that your promises are either naive, or it's just dishonest. What is he wrong about?
Well, you know, let me point out that the former superintendents of the Chicago Police Department, including Terry Hilliard, who I worked with twice, as well as Commissioner Johnson, have each said under the right circumstances, hundreds of police officers will return from retirement to work, and hundreds of police officers will return from other policing districts and rejoin the ranks if they are not penalized.
All right, let's bring in Dana Kozlov now. She's a political investigative reporter with CBS News there in Chicago. Dana, great to see you. We know that policing and crime are major issues in this race. It's, some would argue, a reason the previous mayor didn't win her re-election bid. So where do these candidates stand on that topic, and which do police unions seem to support?
Well, I think we could say that public safety and crime is the #1 issue in this election, Errol. The candidates are very different when it comes to policing, though, in particular. Paul Vallas, who you just heard respond to Brandon Johnson's question, he wants to increase the ranks of officers. He wants to make it easier for police officers, as he puts it, to be police officers, and that is a primary goal. He wants more police officers on the streets, and he wants to reestablish a robust beat policing system. Brandon Johnson, who is considered a progressive candidate, he does not want to beef up the current police ranks. He wants to actually promote 200 officers. And again, we've been losing more than 1,000 officers here in the city over the last few years. He wants to not only promote 200 officers to detective to improve the clearance rate here, but he wants to take a substantial amount of money and divert it to other policing programs, alternative policing programs, for example, like instituting mental health responders to respond to 911 calls and not police officers, and also to meet the consent decree, which the police department is still currently under and needs to meet. So they're very different philosophies on exactly how to handle crime in the city, and I think that is very much going to play a role in how voters end up casting their ballots.
Well, Vallas and Johnson also butted heads over taxes. Let's play another soundbite for our audience.
I think my primary question is your $800 million plan. Your $800 million plan is dependent on an income tax, because most of that money would have to come from a city income tax. So how is your $800 million plan going to work if the biggest tax proposal that you included in that plan was taxing income?
I did not propose a city income tax. You really got to stop saying that. I mean, I know your Republican donors are using lies to disparage me, but you should be able to tell the truth. What I've made very clear is this, that it is a document that gets at the problem that you created. Eliminating the structural deficit without raising property taxes, that's a value. The people of Chicago deserve that.
So tell us, Dana, the city, it is in need of additional funds. You heard Johnson blaming Vallas for that deficit. But how are voters resonating with this? The possibility that income taxes might be created or property taxes might be increased?
Well, both candidates, Lana, say they do not want to increase property taxes, because that's a real issue here in Chicago right now. Some folks are seeing massive property tax hikes. So both say they do not want to increase property taxes. Paul Vallas specifically saying that he wants to cap individual property tax assessment hikes every 3 years. That aside, this is where they are fundamentally different. Brandon Johnson wants to, as he says repeatedly, he wants to invest in people of Chicago, which means more programs, social service programs, more housing, et cetera, affordable housing in particular. And so he has put forth a plan where he is implementing taxes. To be fair, income taxes are not a part of Brandon Johnson's plan. That is not in his plan, tax plan at all. But he does want to do things like implement a real estate transfer tax on properties worth more than $1 million, raise that. He wants to reinstate a corporate head tax. He wants to create a bank and securities or trade tax. So he is very clear about that, and that definitely is a red flag to many members of the business community. Paul Vallas is not talking about any additional taxes like that. He says that there's money to be found in the budget already that isn't being utilized correctly, et cetera. So in the end, you have one candidate saying, hey, this is what I want to do for the city. This is my platform, but I'm going to need to raise money, and here's how I'm going to do it. That's Brandon Johnson. On the other hand, you have Paul Vallas saying, well, I want to cap property taxes, and that is it at this point. And so I think that also, again, is another key issue, because I think voters will have to decide, well, whose side are they on? Do they want to, kind of pursue this more progressive platform, or are they concerned about being taxed and feed right out of the city and are going to go with the more, let's go the more Vallas route in that regard, especially when it comes to economic development?
Well, thank you, Dana, especially for that context and that fact check, because the candidates themselves were saying you're not telling the truth. All right, Dana Kozlov, thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.